Yeah. So like I said, the command system that we're going to build later is built on the business rules system. There's only a few differences that we're going to see. Like one is a command has to be parsed. You have to parse a command. And so, because you could have a command, inside a command, and those can have parameters, separate parameters from different layers of the command calling structure. And so you need there's a lot there for like parsing, and in particular command string parsing, and that's called lexicographical analysis. So then you have commands that support that, and business rules that support it, and all this other stuff. But the basic fundamental structure of how you execute is very similar. There's another difference is commands require a command queue. So you pull a command from the command queue and execute that command queue from the command queue. And you're done with that one, you execute the next command, and the next command, and the next command, and until you're done. It's like a print, right? But the business rules can chain. So you can have the output of one business rule as the input to the next business rule, and the output of that business rule inputs to the next business rule, and so and so and so and so. They'll just chain across. One, A calls B, calls C, calls D, kind of thing. And in this space, it's a little bit more dynamic because I'm basically executing that chaining of business rules using data. Now, some organization, and you'll see it in the code. There's places where I do function A, call function A, and then call function B, and then call function C, like that, in places.
Yeah.
And that's chaining. That's a form of chaining. You can take the output of this and feed it as an arrow function, or you could do all kinds of funky things of taking the output of this and resolving it as the input to that, and you can do stuff like that in code. I'm doing it dynamically from data, so I'm driving my chaining from data, and that's what this business rule system is built on, and the command system is built on a similar architecture.
Right. Okay.
So let me just keep going here. We got the Bootstrap business rules. The next one is client rules. And I think I'm not sure if I mentioned this before. Client rules. Get that there. And we'll do the header real quick, and then I'll sort of talk through the client rules. At function, add client rules, description is merges, and the description gives a little bit. Merges client defined business rules with the system defined business rules. Okay, so that explains it a little bit. And the parameter here takes an array of objects. And this object, there we go. And I'll give you an example here of what this means. The client business rules that should be merged with the system rules. Okay, return void and author date 2022. Oops. 0124. I'm going to copy paste this stuff right up from this one, and the only difference is the name. Add client rules goes right here. And now we cannot log this client rules. I'll explain why in a minute. We're going to see that. Okay, object dot sign D business rules client rules. And this is a major magic piece that we're going to need. Like I think I mentioned it before in the last session. Client rule, this add client rules, and the idea of adding client rules is the basis of what we do when we go to build a plugin system. Because all we're doing is we're taking a set of business rules or functions that are defined somewhere else, and we're merging them with the D data structure business rules data hive, which is going to have all of the system-defined business rules. Okay, so let me explain a little bit here. Object.assign just merge object. This object.assign will merge objects, JSON objects. And D is our data structure. We saw that in many places already in configuration and so whatnot. Business rules is going to be our data hive where we store all our business rules. Now, a cool thing about JavaScript is that objects can be integers, they can be booleans, they can be strings, they can be floats, they could be JSON objects that contain objects and arrays and other objects and strings and integers and booleans and floats and all of that, but also more objects and more objects. But the really, really cool thing is that JavaScript objects can also be functions, executable, fully qualified, add client business rules functions, just like that. This whole add client thing, function with an arrow or what, if it's arrow function, whatever, it can be it is an object. And so all I'm doing is I am adding the client business rules, which is a list of function objects or a data structure of function objects, and I'm adding it to the D data structure data hive for business rules, which is also a list of function objects. Are we starting to get it a little bit? Mm-hmm. Okay, and that's why we had this Bootstrap business rules, because it's going to call this init rules library, which we're going to implement, by the way. We're going to implement that in another file when we get to it. And this init rules library, it will initialize this D business rules data hive. And then it's going to store all the framework-defined business rules functions inside that D data structure. So it's going to define them right there. It'll define them, and then it's going to add them to this D data structure. And here we're just merging it. So now you get the idea that the client can go, the client, in our case, our client is the test harness, right? You go to the folder, the test folder, and you got testharness.js. It can define its own business rules, and we will. Eventually we'll define business rules in a test harness. And now we're merging the application-defined business rules with the framework-defined business rules. So now the two of them will coexist together, which is really powerful. And we're going to do the same thing with commands. The commands can be application-defined commands, and we can have framework-defined commands. And then they're going to be merged as well. Okay? Mm-hmm. Does it get a little bit of that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, next, let's go on to the next function. And that is function process rules. Input data, input metadata, and rules to execute. Okay, because we can have any number of rules. You could have 2 rules, or you could have 200 rules. It's whatever you want executed in a chain. And the header is a lot. There's a lot of header here. So, but this is a big function. It's one of the most important functions. At function, because this is what gets called to execute a business rule. Process rules. At description, parse the given input object, integer, data, function, through a set of business rules. If you need me to copy this, I can. Some rules do not support chaining, where the rules defined in the input rules array. Okay, I can copy paste that for you. I apologize. This particular function, it just has a lot. There's just a lot here. Okay, I'm doing the QE framework training. And the types are String, pipe, integer, pipe, boolean, pipe, object, pipe, function. There's actually more because we could have arrays and all kinds of funky stuff. But we can just copy paste this into metadata as well, and the return. And this rules to execute is going to be an array of string. And the descriptions for these, again, I'm sorry for the length. There's no getting around it. This is a big function. The primary input data that should be processed by the business rule. S, with an S inside of it like that. Okay. Again, additional metadata that should, and I'll put this on the next line, should be used when processing the business rule. Okay. Rule to execute. The name, S, could be plural, of the rule, S, that should be executed for modding the input data. Okay, and the return, oops, is a modified data object, string, integer, boolean, it could even be array, blah, 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 blah. I'll do a comma after that. Where the data has been modified based on the input data, input metadata, and business rule that was executed. Okay, author, date, and I'm going to put a special note in here. Cannot use the loggers here because of a circular dependency. Okay, so I'm going to go to the data broker and pull, I guess this is a decent place to start, one of the contents of this.
Where's that at? In
I just pulled it from any one of the rule brokers, any rule broker functions.
data broker? Okay.
Yeah, something decent here, one of those, whatever. We're going to have to modify it anyways. And name should be process rules. And I'm going to uncomment all of this because this is a fresh function. Okay, so we begin, and then input data is, we need to JSON stringify that. Get input data. Now I guess I'll copy paste this 2 more times. And metadata. Oops. And rules to execute, same thing. Okay, I'm going to make sure I wipe out the implementation from the copy. And then this should be return data. And over here as well, return data. And this should be return data as well. And from the concept of signals processing, if you're processing the signal and you're applying a filter to that data, whatever it is, If you make a mistake or you don't want to apply a filter, but you still want to maybe at least execute the filter command. So what we're going to do is say let return data equals input data. So what this does is it assigns the output to the input. So if in case we don't do anything, maybe rules to execute is an empty array, or we screwed something up somewhere, our return is going to be the same as our input. And that's the idea from signal processing. So we say if rules to execute, and I'm going to put my end if here, end if rules to execute. I'm going to say for let rule in rules to execute. And this is a form of a for loop. I'll put the end for here as well. And for, so it means for every rule in the rules to execute input array, we've now set what the rule is. So we say if rules to execute dot has own property rule. It means basically, does the rule, is there something there? Does the rule have something in it? I'll put my end if here again, end if, and copy paste that into here, just in case if he has ADHD or whatever. It's good practice. Okay, so then we say let key equals, and this is a redefinition, so maybe not necessary, but I find that it is useful. Console.log key is, you can do backticks here. Key is $ curly brace key, and let value equal rules to execute key. So we're using the key now to access the rule that we want to execute. Console.log backtick value is $ curly brace value. So now we're logging out the value, and now we're going to execute the business rule. And this is the most magical thing of all. It's so freaking cool. Apologize my language. Okay. We could say return data equals D, so we're accessing the D data structure, business rules, and now the name of the business rule that we want to execute is value, because we got it using the key. The key was the key in the array, whatever the key is, to get to that value. Now, when I call value, that should be a function, but I'm accessing it like an array element. So how do we call a function using an array? Well, that's kind of cool. This is what we do next. We pass the return data and the input metadata, and that's how, right there. So now we're calling it, and this is the for that function. It looks kind of weird, but that's how it works. And it works really well. Okay, so yeah, all that we do now is just the exports. That's the end of the function, the end of the file. Module.exports equals our usual friendly neighborhood module exports. Bootstrap business rules. And that's a colon. Now that one doesn't take any inputs. We do an empty parenthesis, arrow function, bootstrap, business rules. This one is a add client rules, which does take client rules, arrow function to add client rules, client rules. And the final one is process rules, input data, input metadata, rules to execute, Call that arrow function to process rules. And we do the same here. All that business can just drop straight into there. Okay. Awesome sauce. Outro here. So all we got left now is the rules library, which is going to have all of our definitions for those business rules that we're going to implement initially. We have an array parsing rules library, or rules file, and a string parsing rules file. The array parsing, I think, only has one function in it, or maybe two, and the string parsing has like 6 or 8 functions or so. And then we'll basically be done with our very, very basic business rules implementation, the most basic we could possibly have. And after that, we'll dive into building out a hierarchical configuration system, which is going to be our advanced configuration. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a taste of what's to come, and near term and midterm.
Sounds good.
All right, man. Have a good rest of the evening, and I'll see you tomorrow.
You too, Seth. Thanks, man.
Thanks,
Later.
bye.
Bye.